Good afternoon and good morning to the North American chapter members. We are excited to have you here today for what I think is going to be an incredible panel discussion focused on how organizations are really using data from a planning perspective. We all know that everybody is gearing up for 2026 planning right now. And we thought that this was a perfect time to really hear from people who sit in house across a spectrum of companies to really understand what their expectations are as it pertains to data integration from a planning perspective. So let me just quickly introduce myself. My name is Mary Elizabeth Germaine. I've met many of you as the North American chapter leader for AMEC. I am also a member of the global board and have been an active member of this organization for, I think, like well over a decade right now. And just, love just bringing this incredible resources to bear to really drive education and learning for our member population. I'm going to turn it over to our panelists to quickly introduce themselves, and then we will get going. So Ed, you are first on my screen. I will start with you.
Sure. Well, thank you for inviting me to this, Mary Elizabeth. And I'm really happy to be here and hopefully share something that's of interest, to everyone. I oversee global marketing and communications for the American Egg Board. The American Egg Board is a farmer-funded, we're 100% farmer-funded checkoff program. So if you're familiar with the incredible edible egg, which has not been a jingle for us for over 10 years, but everyone still remembers it. That's what we do. So our job is to drive demand for eggs and egg products. So I work for farmers.
Sarah?
Of course. So I'm Sarah Myles, and I'm the Global Communications Measurement and Insights Director at McDonald's. I've been at McDonald's for about 4.5 years. Prior to that, I was at Edelman in the data and intelligence practice for about 10 years. So doing very similar things, but in very different settings between the in-house and then also kind of the agency experience. So we'll be lending kind of both perspectives throughout the panel today.
And then finally, Fluke?
Thank you, Mary Elizabeth. Hi, everyone. My name is Foluke. I am with UNICEF, the United Nations Agency for Children. I am in the Division of Global Communication and Advocacy here in New York at the headquarters, and we do have a small team within that division that works on strategic planning, monitoring, and evaluation of our communications to ensure that we are reaching our target audience. So happy to join the panel and look forward to the chat.
Great, thank you. So Julie did drop just a note in the chat. If you do have Q&A, and we will open this up for Q&A towards the end, if you can just please use the Q&A button, that little link, instead of the chat to ask your questions. It'll just make it a little bit easier for me from a moderator perspective. So a little PSA there. All right, so let's get started. And where I want to start is, we're entering end of year planning and everybody is gearing up for 2026. So I would love it if each of you could just share your expectations on the role of data as part of your strategic planning process, recognizing everybody may do it a little bit differently, but when you really think about that role of data, what are the expectations that you have or even your stakeholders? Foluke, why don't we start with you?
Sure, happy to go. As we all know, well, maybe some people don't know, but UNICEF is in at least 190 countries, and we have those presence in those countries united to focus on our mission, which is making sure that we protect the rights of children everywhere. And for us, it's not just end of year planning, it's not just new year planning, it's also planning for a new strategic plan. Our 5-year strategic plan for 2026 to 2029 starts on 1st of January of next year. So it has been a whole year of looking at data from the past 5 years and looking at how do we set the baseline, the milestones, the target for the next year, and how specifically in our communications data are we going to be able to pull insights to be sure that we align with what we want to see as the outcomes for children. lucky for us, the Barcelona Principles 4.0 are out at the right time. So we've been anchoring on Principle 1 and Principle 2 to set our clear, measurable objectives and to make sure that all our stakeholders are well defined right from the beginning so that we can deliver on what we are mandated to do.
Great. And Sarah, what about you?
Happy to go next. So at McDonald's, data isn't just a checkpoint at the beginning of planning, and it's really used as the engine that drives it from the start. And so I do think there's kind of a fun fact in here where when we're looking ahead to 2026, our team actually spearheaded the entire process, which is a major shift, not just at McDonald's, but just thinking about, the measurement and insights industry at large. So it's really insights leading strategy, not just being brought in to validate the strategy. And so in fact, I've been a part of, various planning committees since I joined, the 4+ years ago. I think it was even the first 6 months hit the ground running and helping develop the brand comms plan. But I've definitely lived in both extremes, right? And just thinking too at my time at Edelman and some of the clients we were working with of, being brought in late, where you end up really reshaping the plans around what the data says versus being brought in early, where you're really shaping the vision and priorities from day one. So the difference is really night and day when it comes to even just basic ways of working, but also ensuring that you have a strategy and a plan that is data-based and data-led that will truly, drive impact. And so when I think and get a little bit more tactical, right, beyond just the role of data, it's even just thinking about the approach. So what is the more tactical elements in which we're leveraging data to inform? So for us, it's, defining the outcomes that we're looking to drive. So for example, employee retention. The second is really setting those measurable goals around each stakeholder group. The third being shaping our strategies around, what are the opportunities and risks based on our research. Then mapping, okay, we've got the strategies, we've got the risk. What are those storytelling priorities and messages really, really around them? And then the last element of this is what are those initiatives that are going to drive the biggest impact? So for each of those components of the plan, data is that central point to inform kind of what this whole thing ends up being.
Got it. And Ed, what about American Egg Board?
So we use data in kind of three general areas. And it's actually really, it's very kind of apropos to be invited to this panel to talk right now, because as Mary Elizabeth certainly knows, we're going through an exercise that we haven't done before, which is really revisiting our channel strategy or our marketing mix strategy. So what is informing a lot of the work that we're doing kind of falls into three buckets: is past performance, like how did the programs do in the past, and looking at that analysis. We have a very well-defined target audience, and so we do a lot of research to continue to better understand this audience and strengthen this audience. So we look at the primary research that we're doing there, as well as other kind of annual trackers. So we have an annual tracker that looks at a number of different areas around attitudes and behaviors and usage of using eggs. And so we look at that as well, tracker, to see if we're making progress in important areas. And then the last is secondary or syndicated research. And in that, we look at it more through the lens of providing, I think, a broader context in where our audience lives. So it just helps to sort of set the stage in a few different ways. But Sarah, I couldn't echo what you said, for the beginning, is that this is all insights and data driven. That is where we start in everything that we do. We're fortunate to have at the American Egg Board a team that sit in-house, that focus on research and insights. And if you're from the commodity board world, that's pretty special and unusual. And so that team, from day one, has been an extension of our team. Because we work with them hand in glove. So Sarah, I hope you'll be happy to hear that research is sitting with us right at the beginning, when we start doing planning.
Got it. And Ed, can you just, taking this like a little bit of a step further, when you go to your internal stakeholders, either your CEO, or when you're going out to potentially farmers to sell in your annual plan, what type of data do you need to show to support that's like the sale of your plan?
So, I think when we're looking at specifically from like kind of the marketing, or I'm sorry, from the PR standpoint, or you mean just in general?
In general,
In general.
PR,
So,
broader marketing. I know
yeah,
because you play on both sides, but
right.
yeah.
I mean, I think we're looking at, what we're looking at are actually the results that we have from the program. So, I agree with what Sarah said. It's like, what are your objectives? What are your outcomes? And what are you trying to move? And that's sort of your North Star and what you're operating from. So, what we're looking at are going to be the research metrics that sort of demonstrate that we are kind of moving that needle. So, is it our reach of our target audience being one? So, I'll use just media and PR as an example. We don't really look at impressions. That's not really an important metric to us. Reaching our audience is certainly an important metric, and we spend time looking at that. But we also really are looking at the quality of the coverage. Because I think when you talk about the reach, you feel confident of being in front of your audience, and then the quality of the actual coverage, that starts to demonstrate impact, and that you are actually having, you're actually reaching your audience and kind of shifting those attitudes and behaviors.
Okay. And Sarah, do you have anything to add in that in terms of what you need to sell a plan
Yeah.
internally?
Yeah. And I think there's another kind of distinction in here is, when we're selling to, the chief comms officer, right? It's going to be a lot different than us selling to the CEO when it comes to his, executive visibility plan. And so when I think about selling and where we've seen the biggest unlock, it all comes down to outcomes. And so for some of these leaders, especially outside of the comm space, it's maybe not the impressions or engagements. It's let's anchor us on, communications moves the business forward in this capacity. And so similar to Ed, we have a global reputation and impact tracker program. So we're looking at 7 stakeholder audiences across, our top 10 markets, and we're able to distill not only the measurement and insights, but also these proof points that have really, helped us unlock, a lot of perspective internally about the value comms is adding to the business. And so just to take that a level click down, it's, with policy influencers example, we're anchoring on increasing advocacy and accelerating, development plans. With franchisees, it could mean, likelihood to reinvest in the business, likelihood to speak favorably about the business in, their communities. And we've basically have distilled these proof points down to a formula or a one-pager, with the formula being A, what's the stakeholder? B, what's the intended outcome? And C, what's the proof point? So for an example with that, so with policy influencers, we know with policy influencers, a strong reputation makes them X times more likely to welcome McDonald's into their local community. And so we're anchoring on outcomes, and then our comms objectives being reputation. And then we ladder up all of, the different, strategic, tactical plans. And that clarity really gives comms a seat at the strategy table, not just, the reporting table.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I just want to underscore what Sarah said at the very beginning, because I think it's a really important point, which is like any good marketer or comms person is, who is your audience for what you are selling into? I said at the beginning, my ultimate audience are farmers. They're not interested in how the quote unquote sausage is made. They just want to know what they're getting for their money. And so that outcome piece becomes really important to them, and explaining it in a way, that they understand, because they're not marketers, and yeah, it's just a really good point to make sure you know your audience that you're selling into.
Yeah. And I want to just say, and I think it reinforces something that AMEC as an organization has been saying for a long time. And when we look at the Barcelona principles, it is that outcome focus. Like, what are you ultimately trying to achieve from that business perspective? And how do you ladder then different metrics underneath that to demonstrate impact? Sarah, on when you're selling and just some of the different stakeholders that you have and how you're adopting, because I think, the way that you set up where the role that your team now is playing in the planning process and taking that lead role, Do you face internal barriers to adopting a more data-centric approach? Are there barriers maybe that you overcame between last year and this year that kind of set you guys up in a different way to play more of that lead role going into 26?
Yeah, absolutely. And when I think even, taking the full step back, some of the barriers that I've, experienced at McDonald's, also carried over from some of the companies that I, had worked with during my time at Edelman. And so the barriers are absolutely real, and I've seen them across function, companies, etc. But I do think when I think about just comms as a whole is, the first, kind of barrier is that strategy to execution gap. And so finding more and more teams getting caught up in the churn of, campaigns, content, issues management. And so there's a lot of, day-to-day things that are happening, but if we're not connecting that day-to-day to the strategy, not just at the onset of the year, but throughout the year, we're not doing the business, justice. Another barrier to the data-centric planning is culture. And so weaker data acumen, lack of, operational discipline. And so one thing that even for us kind of from the onset, based on some of my career learnings I've had is, making sure planning is also connected to operations. So are the teams, taking the pause, as Ed said, he works very closely with, the research and insights team. Okay, are you doing that? Is your friend doing that? Are your other colleagues doing that? And so making sure that, teams are taking the pause to align. The communications industry moves so fast. And with that movement, it works well, right, in the day-to-day, but when we're talking strategy, we're talking vision, we're talking future, it's important to pause and align on, do we have the right people in the room? Do we have the right information to make decisions? Do we have the right processes? Do we have the right definitions of, success? And so overcoming these requires both the muscle along with the mindset. So the muscle being the data, but the mindset being building that culture of discipline, alignment, and true enterprise, thinking.
Got it. Foluke, I'd like to turn to you. I think what would be helpful for many of our participants is really understanding when you're working with your agencies or even some of your internal teams, what is your biggest frustration when it comes to the integration of data into these strategic plans? To your point, you're planning for kind of where are you going as you start 2026, but you're also looking out 5 years. So what are the frustrations that you experience in terms of how your partners are bringing data forward?
Thank you, Mary Elizabeth. And some of it is going to tie to what Sarah and Ed had just said. For us, we are looking at, we say we communicate to advocate, and we want our communication to actually be hitting at our advocacy targets, and we want to get feedback. And so internally, are there gaps? Are there some frustrations? Yes. When we are asking our colleagues more questions, it's because we want it to be really like context driven. It's context specific to your context. What is the outcome we want this communication to give us? And in our world, unfortunately, we've seen the scale up of humanitarian situations all over. In the last decade, we've seen how not just the pandemic, which was global and which forced us all to come out virtually, we've seen how the infrastructure needed in many parts of the world where we have our work for children, where we want to communicate, where we want to make sure that we are getting those outcomes linked directly to what our strategic plan says we want to achieve as an organization. We then have to be the group and the team that asks colleagues a little more of those critical and hard questions. And we want to have colleagues, like Ed said, connect the research, the insights we are getting, the evidence we are getting from what our data is saying into how we actually communicate, into the channels that we use, into making sure that the advocacy targets are able to give us some feedback that we can plug into what next, into where we go next, and into how we tweak the work that we do to actually get the outcomes that we expect. So those frustrations remain. They are compounded by a lot of issues that are ongoing globally. There is also misinformation around a lot of the work that we do, which we need to combat and which we must combat with evidence. We must combat with the facts that will enable our programs to gain traction in the areas where children have the most critical needs for their rights to be attained.
Got it. Thank you. Sarah, do you experience any frustrations when you're working with any of your either internal or external partners?
Yeah. So, being the first, measurement and insights team at McDonald's, you could expect there's probably a number of frustrations, but not necessarily frustrations, but of course, opportunities. And so one of the things that, in just setting, this team up and thinking about who we're working with, what are the tools, that we're leveraging, we of course did experience that disconnect. How are we centralizing? How are we ensuring this arm is talking, to this arm? And so one of the things that, we thought through is how our agencies or our firms connected to each other. Do they understand what the right hand is doing while, the left is executing on X, Y, and Z? And so we've, really tried to foster that agency to agency collaboration. You have absolute permission to contact any of the firms we're working with to problem solve or think about new opportunities or even come to the table with a joint recommendation. On the other side of the coin is being that measurement and insights team. Our job is to be that agenda owner in the sense of what are we focused on in terms of our resources, and then bringing all of those different insights together across sources so that the story is cohesive, the strategy is clear. And so thinking about the channel analytics, but let's also connect that to what is the true stakeholder awareness and what was the impact, and ensuring that when we're briefing our external partners, we're briefing them, together. We're also outlining what is that, roadmap as it relates to, the different data sources and where we're going from an evolution standpoint, but also making sure that everyone understands their job to be done and essentially, that bigger picture.
Okay. So I was actually going to throw a curveball question at all of you, but Sarah, you just answered it from McDonald. The question is, do you brief agencies at the same time? Right? Because sitting at an agency, I can tell you some clients bring us all together and do one briefing. So everybody's hearing the same thing. And it can be agencies, it can be measurement partners, right? Other companies that are part of the ecosystem. Foluke, are you briefing your external partners all at once?
Not all at once. We have tried to ensure that we get as many services as possible from one partner, but knowing that currently we do combine for media monitoring, that's traditional media monitoring, we do combine 2 services in one agency, and then we have 2 other agencies, and trying to ensure that we can brief all together at once has been because we are also in this transition stage, it has been a task we are yet to accomplish. However, what have we done? What we have done is to ensure that there are quarterly updates. So the quarterly updates will go to all as an email, but for the one-to-one interaction where we want to say, this is what is changing, or this is what is new that we have brought on board, or this is where we are having issues that you could help us as an agency to navigate the way forward. We are still doing that one-on-one at the moment. We are also huge. We are humongous, and we have digital team working here, research team working here. So first of all, my team has pulled together the internal collaboration on a scale that helps us all to speak with one voice. And then now we try to carry that one voice to the agencies through our regular updates, and then schedule the one-to-one per agency, per who is focused on what. For example, I will bring in what we have tried to do with media monitoring on the Gaza situation, and that has sat on my desk. And that in itself is a task that involves collaborating across agencies to see that we are tracking, we're getting the metrics for social, for digital. We're even going into using a tool called Overton to look at legislative processes and what is being mentioned around that issue. And so that's still being done one-on-one, but we do have email communications that goes across to all the agencies. And we are hoping that we will eventually have like one solid newsletter that goes to all our agencies and one solid quarterly meeting across all the agencies.
Got it.
I
And
love the idea,
oh.
and sorry, just to jump in, I love the idea of the quarterly updates and bringing everyone together. We admittedly do this, annually. We have a big, kickoff. We bring, the firms together. We brief them not only on the comms, but what is the business plan? And then how does, it goes business plan, but then we also sit within the global impact function. So what's the global impact strategy for the year? And then we get into comms and kind of serves as like a kickoff, point. And with that, also briefing on what is our innovation roadmap and, the job to be done for the year at a more tactical level. But I love the idea of, business changes on a dime, right? And so I like that regular touch point outside of maybe just the, day-to-day syncs or status calls that focuses on that larger strategy bucket.
Okay. Ed, what about you? I'm going to play dumb that we're not the agency that works with you, so that I know the answer for everybody in the audience who's listening. How do you guys do it for AEB from an integrated planning perspective?
So we look at it by audience. So we would pull together, we would pull together agency partners that we would have by audience. Right now, we have a very, very short roster. That was a change when I joined 2.5 years ago to make. We had a kind of a longer roster of different partners and consultants, and we really, kind of choose to focus. So, for our consumer program, Ketchum is our lead partner. And if we needed other types of partners, to do any particular type of work, we'd really look to Ketchum to do that. So, and if we felt like we needed to brief those partners, we would. But I think like Sarah was saying, if I was in a situation though where you had multiple partners that really needed that seat at the table versus, more of a vendor type of relationship, they 100% would be briefed at the start. I mean, I think that is the right way. I think it's the right way to just start off planning. I also think, when you have multiple agency partners, and I'm coming at this with my former agency hat on because I spent 22 years working in agencies, is that agencies really look to the clients to establish the swim lanes, if you will, and set those sort of expectations. And I think that in and of itself helps reinforce that, kind of who's handling influencer, who's handling media, who's handling this piece of it. Agencies rightfully look to their clients in order to do that. And I think a planning meeting with everybody at the table to be briefed, just reinforces that.
Foluke, back to you. So we talked a little bit about barriers. We talked a little bit about frustrations. Are there any specific data gaps that you see that you were like, man, I wish I could get data that looks like X, for to support your planning efforts?
I would say I will go to benchmarking and baselines. For us, a lot of the time, when it comes to the different communication channels that we use, when you want to eventually look back at your impact and you want to attribute that this was our actual contribution, where did we start from? Getting colleagues to all agree to come with the baseline data that we need is like the task here that is humongous. So that's where I would say there is a big opportunity to ensure that as we start, we know we are benchmarking our progress. We know it's going to be a progressive realization to where we're going to get to. We want to have the baseline data that we need, whether it is on, take for example, we want to look at social channels, and we want to look at how we are communicating specific to, let's use vaccine, which is a very polarized situation, matter in the public discourse. We are already at a level right now which we need to gauge and be sure what's the baseline. How do we then progress? How do we then benchmark and say, this is the target, this is a milestone, we will know that we have crossed. If all our communication and the share of voice that we have, if what we are pulling in from our colleagues is showing us that we are actually making progress, or we need to tweak our methodology. Baselines are an area where we need to really come together across all the different divisions in the house to be sure that setting the baselines that will help our communication to be targeted and help us get the right feedback is agreed upon even before we start. And because we do have a lot of people running with the mission before some other parts of the house catches up, then the baseline becomes staggered, and then benchmarking becomes staggered, and we are not able to really drill in on this is the high impact information, either quantitatively or qualitatively.
Okay. What about you, Ed? Do you see any distinct gaps that you're like, man, I wish we had?
Mhm. Yeah, I'm really also beginning to see why I was invited to this panel. This is a question that, again, is very timely for us. So, like all ag boards, like all ag commodity boards, we don't technically sell anything. We represent our farmers, and our job is to drive demand and change behaviors in that. So when we look at kind of, again, thinking about measurement and thinking about impact, that means that we really, like I said, really focus on changing perceptions and behaviors, to drive purchase intent. So what eludes boards, including us, is sort of that definitive, defendable, clear line to business impact. And it's something that we are just wrestling with right now. Is sort of how can I push it further in demonstrating ROI, and it's something that we're working on, right now. And the reason why we don't, we haven't, traditionally boards do not connect it to sales unless it's like a really specific campaign, is that there are too many factors that are out of our control, Mother Nature being one of them. Other actual egg brands that are doing marketing, that type of thing. So, for us to really to take all the credit for that would be irresponsible, but nor should we take all the blame if things were to dip down. So that is a something that just eludes a lot of different boards. And so we're working right now to find something that we feel is credible and meaningful, in our programming.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna turn a little bit in terms of this discussion, and it still is part of planning. And Ed, you referenced this at one of the earlier questions, but I would love to understand, and Foluke, this actually ties directly to what you were just saying about baselines and benchmarks.
Mm.
But how, if at all, are you guys using past performance data and measurement to inform future strategies? I would say, like, as working in this industry for a very long time, quite often measurement is a diagnostic. It's like, did we succeed or not? Where I keep saying to clients, it should be prescriptive. It should be, okay, did we succeed or not? And then why or why not?
Right.
And that why or why not then turns into how you inform what you're going to do next. So I would just love for you guys to just give some context on how, if at all, you're looking at that past performance to inform future strategies, not necessarily measuring future impact, but future strategy information.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you want me to start?
You can start. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I said that, at the beginning of this panel, that it does, it is our starting point. It's like, well, how did we do last year? And to answer your question, we had these goals, and did we achieve them, and did we not? And I don't believe that, every goal necessarily needs to be met. I think sometimes there's a lot of value in, like, well, why wasn't that met? And and concurrently, I think if you're blowing past your goals every year, then you probably don't do a very good job setting goals. But I think you look at this, and, my team has heard me say this before, and certainly our agency team as well, is that if it worked, why? And let's do more of that. If it didn't work, why? And can it be fixed or adjusted? And if it didn't work and it can't be fixed or adjusted, then drop it and move on. Like, don't kind of go down with the ship, so to speak. But understand why it did not work, to help kind of, inform that, moving forward. Yeah, I mean, it is so central to everything that we do. A real kind of more tangible example might be our current consumer marketing programs. The campaign is called Meant to Be Broken, and we launched it last year. It was incredibly successful. I mean, we revised our goals twice during the year because we kept going past them, which is great. We had to pause it at the beginning of this year because we were dealing with a significant industry issue, bird flu. I'm sure everyone on this call is familiar with that. But we resumed it. And when we resumed it, where did we start? With the data from 2024. And what we did is we sort of narrowed kind of, well, which creative really resonated the most, what format. And I think, and if I know there are a few people from my team that are on here, who would keep me honest, but we had a 15-second and 30-second video, and I think we just focused on the 15-second. The 30-second wasn't performing. That's a really tangible way about how data, can be optimized, or I shouldn't say optimized, used, it to inform kind of future programming.
Got it. Foluke, anything to add?
Let me add, Mary Elizabeth. We have started pivoting our indicators towards having maturity indexes so that we have a kind of a gradient on it's not just about you hit this number and now, yay, it's going to be how is it maturing? How is it eventually translating into change? And how is it eventually contributing to what, for country offices, for example, what the country wants to see happen for children, for example. So, I mean, I think it was, the AMEC measurement maturity map, the M3 mapper, is coming out just right at the right time for us. We have tried to use the maturity index to try to see, for example, what mechanisms exist to get children's voices and young people's voices into the processes of child rights in their countries. So it's not just because they liked our videos or they engaged with some of the communication that we put outside, but it's also are they establishing channels and mechanisms for themselves? Is the country making effort to establish such channels and bring those voices in? So we're not just running parallel systems, but we're integrating it into what's actually happening. So maturity is helping us to go away from just setting one target, we hit it and yippee. It's what's next, what comes next after this target, and how do we progressively go to the end goal that we want to see, which is that change in the country. I think I'll pause it there. I was going to add how we worked on reviewing our target setting internally, but I think Sarah, you want to come in?
Yeah.
Sure. I kind of wanted to build on something you said, Mary Elizabeth, from the onset about learning. And I am a major stickler in this philosophy of the primary purpose of measurement is learning, understanding, diagnosing, rather than the scorecard you put on, the refrigerator, job well done. And so one of the ways, for us is that we bring rigor into that planning process is making performance part of the process. And so for the day-to-day work, so not thinking annual plans, but even the things that we're doing, from week to week, we've standardized the workflows and embedded, data and performance into that operation. And so, thinking about our initiative briefs, right? We've got goals that we set based on looking at similar initiatives, whether, initiatives that we do or initiatives that, other brands are doing to help us set those targets. Then we also have an in-flight optimization period. So, 48 hours, 1 week after something launches, sit down and ask ourselves the tough questions. Are we going to hit our goals? What have we learned to date? Do we need to pivot? Then we move into the postmortems where we're collecting all of the learning. So we look channel by channel by channel. What did we win and what did we learn, and really document those findings. And for us, that really creates a feedback loop that then can make each plan, stronger and stronger. And then the second component when it comes to, using past performances, we've designed a prioritization framework. And so how you could do something like this is, looking at all the work that you've done at the initiative and tactical level, looking at performance data. You could also look at budget. You could look at level of effort, and essentially bringing those elements together and being able to even, rank what we've done, what's high, medium, and low impact. And that helps us to determine, what work needs to stop, what work should we continue or revisit the strategy, and what maybe work we should deprioritize. And I know probably everyone on this call is booked and busy, and having that data is really there to help you from a both planning side, but also prioritization.
Got it. All right, I want to flip to AI for a minute because I feel like we cannot let this discussion go by today without touching on AI. And I would love, Ed, maybe you can kick us off here, is how do you see AI influencing the future of communications planning? How, if at all, are you using it today? How do you want to use it? Just what are your expectations?
Yeah, this is an area that is really exciting for me. And my caveat with that, my disclaimer is I am not a tech person. I'm a proud owner of an iPhone 13. So, I am not a tech forward person at all. But this is, I find, really exciting and fascinating. And I have since the very beginning. So we are using, and I would say but I would say exploring, experimenting, and learning. It's so new right now. And I love the Wild West when something new comes along, and it's very rare in this business because there's not really a roadmap and you're sort of figuring it out. And I think that's something to really be embraced. And anyone that says that they're an expert in this, I would take that with a huge grain of salt. But the two areas that we're using it in is we're expanding our search strategy to incorporate generative AI or GEO, sorry, generative engine optimization. And we're doing that because, I mean, if you think about a year ago, were you even talking about using ChatGPT in search? And now it is growing just so rapidly, and particularly for our target audience, which is largely centers around Gen Z, from from an age demographic standpoint. So that is an important area, and it's been like quite a journey this year, just kind of learning from it and the impact it's going to have on our programming. And because where GEO scrapes its information from, suddenly earned media, by example, takes on a heck of a lot more prominence and importance from a strategy standpoint because it is going to feed into search, which is now becoming one of the top ways that our audience is looking for information. The second is we have built, working with Ketchum on both of these initiatives, we have built and are training a synthetic generative AI target audience. So I mentioned earlier on, we've made a significant investment in both time and money in creating an audience, refining this audience, and strengthening it. And we now have kind of brought this audience into the AI verse. And it's been really fun. I mean, like kind of, experimenting with it. So right now, what we're doing to sort of train and learn from it is to pressure test social content, for example. We may run something past, do they like it or do they not like it? We will maybe run creative ideas by. And one great example, one small example we just had is we have resumed, we have a collaboration with Roblox. So we have a gaming activation called Tower of Eggs. And there's an NPC. I'm talking like I really know what I'm knowing, but I'm not a gamer here either. But we have this NPC, and if you don't know what an NPC is, it's sort of this avatar that's like, "Come play this game." So it's not really a game that's playing. And we ran the NPC creative past it, and the AI came back and said, "Put a tattoo on its arm," and it was like, this is amazing, so we've added a tattoo and it's this little fried egg in a pan. And it's just that kind of thing is what I think is really fun about experimenting with it. So search and target audience are the two areas that we're exploring with AI.
Got it. Foluke, what about you? Is UNICEF doing anything in this space?
We are externally in the wider space trying to ensure that the rights of children are actually protected no matter how AI is used. Internally, yes, for a lot of our work, our goal is to look internally for our own internal AI platforms. So just like Ed was saying, when we look at children 50 years from now, 20 years from now, their world is going to be actually very different. And for example, I've asked AI before to generate Boolean strings for me to just try to do a search to see how some kind of context was performing. But we have tried to make sure that for now, we focus at the internal. What are the internal tools that we have versus using random AI tools that are out there that pull in different information about children with a caveat. So internally, we are using AI to summarize. We are using AI for translation. We still have a translation desk that sits to ensure that all our reports are fact-checked and the translations actually are real. But to make things faster, for more efficiency, we do have an AI tool that we are using for that. We do have the Microsoft Copilot installed into the intranet to help our work be a bit more easier for the data management. What we are looking to do is how to use AI for flash appeals. I mentioned earlier about humanitarian situation scaling up globally on the levels that we have not seen before, the unprecedented need of children in these places. How do we, when there has just been an emergency situation, use AI to kind of generate a quick and flash appeal to get that financial contributions that we need from our partners? How do we get people to see that, okay, this has happened here, I can support with this, and AI just does all of that, feeding on the content that we regularly would use to generate such information without us having to put in all the massive efforts that we usually will do. That's one area. Another area we're still looking to do is the deep search to make sure that those searches are bringing out the actual correct information, because we do have our research team working with a lot of administrative data from countries and with statistical offices and other research agencies. How do we, handshake between communications, tech, and the research team to use AI to make things easier and to make it faster and to actually give children what they will be used to in the world that is what the world is turning out to be for them.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to pause on my string of questions because I actually only have one more that I want to ask everybody, but I want to hop over to the Q&A quickly and make sure that our audience has an opportunity to ask some questions as well. We have 2 questions thus far. So if anybody else has any additional questions, please drop them into that Q&A tab and we'll get to them. So the first question is regarding social media. And what you all feel are the key metrics that are worth measuring in social media and why. And I think, Ed, you talked a little bit about, like, we don't measure impressions, we measure, quality of coverage. Are we reaching the right people? But can any of you, and whoever wants to volunteer to answer this, get a little bit specific on social media channels, the metrics for social media channels and why you use those?
Yeah, I can hop in. So when I think about just larger measurement strategy, we're kind of looking at it in kind of 2 ways. One, is it brand focused? So thinking about, is it designed to drive, point of purchase and, any sales elements, or is it a reputation play where it's designed to, shift perceptions and those deep rooted, thoughts and feelings and mindsets. And so we have, measurement frameworks designed to support brand along with support reputation. And so when I think about that and how it looks in practice, right, $5 value menu meal at McDonald's, right? We're trying to make this thing, sing from every, household absolutely possible. The objective is, in reach, it's virality, it's buzz. And then when I think about some of the work we're doing, on community, right? So 1 in 8 campaign, for example, which is, 1 in 8 of people in the US have worked at McDonald's. And one of the goals of that is showing, we're invested in communities. A lot of the public is a part of that McDonald's, ecosystem. And so for that, we're looking at, favorability in the response and some of those more, deep rooted metrics. So my advice advice is always, what is your objective? Align your measurement plan around the objective, but know that metrics are essentially designed to do, different things.
Okay. Another question is, how many goals should you be setting? So Ed, you talked about meant to be broken and that you kept revising your goals because you kept outperforming. But do you guys have a rule of thumb? Like when you're talking to internal stakeholders about how you performed and the impact of a specific program, how many different goals are you putting forward?
Yeah. And this was a big undertaking that we did in 2023 was to sort of add some apples to apples comparison. When you have an integrated program, you have a very big toolbox that you can draw from, but how do you kind of get your arms around measurement when it comes to all these tactics? So for us, I'm going to sort of, really kind of generalize here. We've really tried to find how engagement and reach. Are we getting to our target audience and are they engaging with it? And that's what we've really tried to center around. So by doing that, you start eliminating, I don't have 10 goals that I'm looking at. It's like, what are the ones that are going to be the most, they're going to demonstrate the biggest impact, but allow me to sort of look across, the marketing mix here and determine where there is impact. Then we also use Omnicom's tech stack in order to understand a brand lift and sales lift in the context of our program. So it's not like a direct, to my point earlier, we don't look at sales because we can't take all the credit, I want to take all the blame, but we do want some sense from a directional standpoint what that brand and sales lift is. And that lets us look at, again, the entire mix.
Got it. Foluke, anything to add?
I will just add how we are beginning to try to see how many high-value partnerships we are getting in through our social channels and how, so while we're not looking at advertising value or whatever, how do our communication through the channels brings us new partners, and at what level are those partnerships? At what level does it help to project the work and the advocacy that we are doing? That's one new area that we have started trying to really use all our channels to see what partnerships are they bringing in.
Got it. And one other question that we got from the audience is, do you guys have any recommendations for low cost options for measuring changes in perceptions, attitudes, and behavior?
Yeah, I can hop into this one. And just now being on the other side of, in-house, right, is one of the things that I've, especially like at McDonald's, folks are very open to, sharing data. That's not a challenge that we have. But one of the things that I do feel like is a big unlock is, how is communications tapping into existing resources? So rather than having to start your own tracker, from scratch or fund it all through, a communications budget, is there something in marketing that's running? Is there a brand health tracker that's already running that, either A, they'd be open to you adding a few questions to, or B, can you buy into it of, we'll pay for this portion of the research if we can have, this much real estate in the questionnaire. And so I do think, comms, as long as like you've got a great relationships with the insights teams, different researchers across the function, you can often negotiate on some of that real estate.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is not admittedly my wheelhouse, and this is when I would call my research and insights team and ask them. But I think as somebody, from sort of the outside who heavily relies on it, is if it's cheap, I'd ask, why is it cheap? Because the methodology is shaky. I mean, it's, you're garbage in, garbage out kind of mentality. So I just really, if it's cheap, I would really look at why it's cheap. And maybe it's fine. Maybe you can make that accommodation, recognizing what the methodology is, because, I think directional research is better than no research. It gives you some frame of reference.
Yeah.
And let me just finally add, for us, we've been able to have some partners say, we will actually fund the research or whatever surveys or whatever you need to make sure that we get impact on, let's say, for example, we're pushing out a documentary and we want to know how did the viewers, how did they perform with them? We've gotten partners who will say yes for the specific one. We will fund it. We're working on the movie with you or the documentary with you or the communication product with you. We will be the ones who fund the measurements and any research that will be needed to grab insights from those who receive the information.
Okay. All right, so we have a couple more audience questions. I'm loving the audience engagement, by the way. So the next question is, do you recommend adjusting your measurement timeframes to get ahead of planning windows, which usually coincide with measurement? So the example is, instead of doing like a year-end report in January, do you run the report in Q3 to inform 2026 planning that will be taking place in Q4? So how are you guys, from a frequency cadence perspective, reporting, aligning to make sure that you have the data to go into the planning window?
Let me take the first tab. We do have 4 quarters reporting, but we have at the beginning of the year set out, for example, by quarter 4, we were supposed to hit this target. So at quarter 3, we do a roundup. Where are we and how far away are we from the targets that we were supposed to achieve in quarter 4? If we start planning for 2026 with the numbers we have now, are we very far off? If we are not too far off, then we begin 2024 planning and just put in a little bit of buffer to say, because more information is going to come at the end of Q4. Here is where we go. In areas where we see, perhaps in quarter 2, we've seen that we are too far away, and by Q3, we wouldn't even have gotten close to what we are planning for Q4. We will not use that data. Rather, we will go and see, how do we tweak the system? How do we tweak what we're doing to make sure that we are on track? Or is it that indicator itself that needs to be adjusted in the new year?
Okay. Ed, Sarah, anything to add?
Yeah, I would say we're definitely quarterly cadence on our side, and maybe that's traditional way of thinking of things. But by at least the third quarter, you've got enough to really work from. So yeah, we keep it at quarterly when it comes to like larger annual goals.
Yeah, we do not quarterly, but 3 times. So we'll do kind of the year end and then 2 others. And I would say by the time as Sarah had said, in the time you get like on the second half of the year, you have a good, handle on kind of how this year is performing. So kind of looking at what previous year, how did we do, is sort of to kind of is the foundational, but then, how has the performance been kind of during that year is sufficient.
Okay. All right, so we have about 3 minutes left. So I'm going to just do a quick flash, 30 seconds for each of you. If there was one piece of advice that you could give a data strategist to make the strategic planning process better, what would it be? Whoever wants to go first.
That will be advising myself too. So I would say continue to strengthen your capacity, and baselines, so you can benchmark without stress. Yeah.
Okay.
Take the AMEC diploma course. It will just tell you how to.
Yeah.
That's a good plug. So I would say the baselines plus the outcomes. And, I think you guys have all heard a big theme being pulled through in a lot of these responses is anchoring on the outcomes. What is the actual job to be done that other folks within the business will understand? So begin with the business outcome you're looking to drive, and then essentially define, the communications objectives that support it. And I'm a true believer in everything else kind of really flows from there.
I'm going to come at this advice question, but maybe from a little bit of a different angle. And I'm kind of reminded, I'm reading right now Keith McNally's memoir, I Regret Almost Everything. And it's a really great memoir, and he has some great lines in it. And one of them I thought was kind of appropriate here. And it was, he's like, sometimes in life, experience or research is an effing hindrance. And he used more colorful language than I did. And I think what I mean by that is, I think don't forget the art in the art and science equation. And I think in a world that is very tech and data driven, the human intervention piece of it and kind of is a very critical part in here. And I think sometimes people can get too tied up into the research, and the research said this, but the research said this. Don't forget the human aspect of it.
Great. Well, I just want to thank you all. I know that, you know, you're giving up valuable time that's taking you away from something else. So just truly thank you so much. This was such an incredible panel. We had almost 50 participants, great Q&A from the audience, so really engaged. And the audience was loving your questions. I don't know if you guys saw the chat, but they were loving your responses to their direct questions. You were hitting them spot on. So thank you so much. For taking the time today. We truly appreciate just hearing your perspectives from an in-house perspective on what agencies and measurement consultants and everything can be doing to move your business forward. So thank you.
Thanks for the
Thanks to
invite.
you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.